In the Southeast Asian nation of Myanmar, a storm is brewing. But it's not the kind of storm you might think. It's a storm of conflict, a storm of revolution. In the heart of Myanmar, the anti-junta forces, known as the Three Brotherhood Alliance, have launched a major offensive, codenamed Operation 1027. This offensive has seen the alliance seizing control of military outposts and towns, shaking the very foundations of the military junta's rule. The junta, once a formidable force, has been dealt a series of harsh blows. Defections have riddled their ranks, soldiers turning their backs on the regime, and casualties have been high. All this turmoil has not gone unnoticed. Reports are surfacing that China, a significant regional player, is starting to lose trust in the junta's ability to maintain order. And order, in this context, is a relative term. Before the offensive, the junta's grip was tenuous at best, with stable control over a mere 17% of the country. Now, that control is being further eroded. The winds of change are blowing, and the storm is intensifying. In the midst of this turmoil, one entity stands out, watching the storm unfold with a keen eye: the European Union. The EU, which has been providing humanitarian aid and imposing sanctions on the junta, has been observing the situation closely. But now, with the landscape shifting and the balance of power teetering, the question that hangs in the air is this: will this rebel offensive change the European Union's approach to the conflict? As the storm intensifies, the world watches, but one entity stands out: the European Union. Will this rebel offensive change the EU's approach to the conflict? The European Union, or the EU, has been closely monitoring the situation in Myanmar. It's a complex and volatile situation with many players on the field. But let's focus on the EU's current stance and actions. The EU has been one of the most vocal critics of the military junta in Myanmar, consistently calling out human rights violations and the suppression of democracy. It's not just words though. The EU has backed its criticisms with actions, providing humanitarian aid to those affected by the conflict and imposing sanctions on the junta. These sanctions are not just symbolic either. They target key sectors of Myanmar's economy, putting pressure on the junta's financial resources. But the EU's approach goes beyond punitive measures. The European Union supports inclusive dialogue with all parties involved in the conflict, including ethnic armed organizations. This is a crucial aspect of their stance, as it acknowledges the multifaceted nature of the conflict. The EU understands that any lasting solution to the crisis will require addressing the concerns and aspirations of all stakeholders. However, the EU is also grappling with a conundrum. While it supports dialogue with all parties, it's unsure about how to engage with these ethnic armed organizations. These groups are not monolithic entities but rather a diverse collection of groups with varying interests and ideologies. Some are aligned with the National Unity Government, the shadow government formed after the coup. Others operate independently, driven by their own agendas. This complexity poses a significant challenge to the EU's efforts to foster dialogue and promote peaceful resolution. The EU sees the recent offensive by the anti-junta forces, known as the Three Brotherhood Alliance, as a potential turning point in the crisis. The offensive, dubbed Operation 1027, saw these forces take control of military outposts and towns, shaking the junta's hold on power. However, the EU is cautious about drawing firm conclusions. The situation is fluid, and the balance of power could shift rapidly. The EU's stance is clear. It supports a return to democracy in Myanmar, and is committed to helping the people of Myanmar achieve this. But the road to this goal is fraught with challenges and uncertainties. Is change on the horizon? The answer to that question is still shrouded in the fog of conflict. But one thing is certain: the EU will continue to play a crucial role in shaping the outcome of this crisis. Amidst the chaos and conflict, the National Unity Government of Myanmar, or the NUG, has a vision. This vision is of a post-war federal democracy. It's a vision of a country that's united under a single banner, yet diverse in its representation. A country where power is shared, where the rights and interests of every ethnic group are respected, and where peace is more than just a distant dream. The NUG is working tirelessly to make this vision a reality. They're reaching out to the West, seeking support in their fight against the military junta. They're appealing to the shared values of democracy and human rights, and they're making their case with passion and conviction. The NUG is not just fighting for power. They're fighting for a principle, for the idea that the people of Myanmar have the right to determine their own future. However, the road to this envisioned future is fraught with challenges. The balance of power within the anti-junta movement is delicate, to say the least. Much of the fighting against the military junta has been conducted by ethnic militias. These groups have their own agendas, their own histories, and they're not formally allied with the NUG. They fight against the junta, yes, but they also fight for their own causes, for their own people. This adds a layer of complexity to the situation. The NUG's vision of a federal democracy involves all ethnic groups coming together, but how can this be achieved when the groups themselves are not united? How can the NUG ensure that their vision is not just a dream, but a viable, achievable goal? These are the questions that the NUG grapples with as they push forward in their fight. They're not just battling a military force, they're battling the complexities of a nation in turmoil, a nation with a diverse and divided population. It's a battle of ideals, a battle of wills, a battle for the very soul of Myanmar. The NUG's vision is ambitious, but will it be enough to sway the EU's approach? Only time will tell. But for now, the NUG fights on, fueled by their vision of a united and peaceful Myanmar. With the recent rebel offensive, the tide may be turning in Myanmar. The rise of the anti-junta forces known as the Three Brotherhood Alliance has sparked a notable shift in the dynamics of the conflict. Their major offensive, dubbed Operation 1027, has seen them wrestle control of military outposts and towns from the military junta, effectively shaking the status quo. This shift in power begs the question, will it affect the European Union's approach to the conflict? The EU has been providing humanitarian aid and imposing sanctions on the junta, but the recent developments may necessitate a more proactive approach. The offensive has been seen by the EU as a potential turning point, but they remain cautious about jumping to conclusions. So what could this mean if the EU does decide to change its approach? Well, a more active involvement could see them providing more substantial support to the National Unity Government, the shadow government formed after the coup. This could tip the scales even further against the junta, potentially hastening the end of the conflict. However, the EU's decision is not as straightforward as it may seem. The balance of power within the anti-junta movement is a concern. Much of the fighting has been conducted by ethnic militias not formally allied with the National Unity Government. The EU supports inclusive dialogue with all parties, including these ethnic armed organizations, but figuring out how to deal with them presents a complex challenge. Moreover, there are reports suggesting that China, a key player in the region, is losing trust in the junta's ability to maintain order. This adds yet another layer of complexity to the situation. Would a change in the EU's approach influence China's stance as well? The rebel offensive has shaken up the status quo, but will it be enough to alter the course of the EU's involvement? Only time will tell. As the situation in Myanmar evolves, so too will the international response. But one thing is certain. The changing tide of this conflict will have lasting implications for the people of Myanmar, the region, and indeed the world. The road ahead for Myanmar is uncertain and fraught with challenges. The nation stands at a crossroads, with the outcome of this conflict likely to redefine its identity and future. The rebel offensive, known as Operation 1027, has shaken the military junta's control and has potentially set the stage for a significant shift in the balance of power. But what does this mean for Myanmar and its people? A potential future for Myanmar could see the rise of the National Unity Government, the shadow government that emerged post-coup, which seeks to establish a post-war federal democracy. However, the journey towards this vision is far from straightforward. The balance of power within the anti-junta movement is a matter of concern, with many of the battles being fought by ethnic militias that are not officially allied with the NUG. In the midst of this volatile situation, the role of the European Union could be pivotal. The EU, which has been providing humanitarian aid and has imposed sanctions on the junta, has the potential to significantly influence the course of events. Their stance towards inclusive dialogue with all parties, including ethnic armed organizations, suggests a willingness to engage with the complexities of the situation. However, a major question mark hangs over how they will deal with these groups. Their approach could very well determine the future trajectory of Myanmar. The impact of the unfolding events in Myanmar extends beyond its borders. The international community watches closely as the situation evolves, with repercussions likely to ripple across geopolitical landscapes. The fate of the Myanmar people hangs in the balance, their future dependent on the outcome of a conflict that has drawn the attention of the world. As we navigate this storm, one question remains. Will the Myanmar rebel offensive change the EU's approach to the conflict? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content on global affairs.